My name is Anna Mei Baker, and I played the nurse in Grim Whimsy. So I'd say the thing that really got me interested in Grim Whimsy was it just sounded like a really interesting premise for an indie film. There's lots of indie films that are sort of sad relationship pieces and things like that. When I was doing my part, we went on location and we traveled. It was super cool, and it made it feel like a more professional production. And the fact that everybody working on it, the director, the crew, and everybody was super professional and super kind. It felt really good to be working with people like that. What I really liked about the nurse is that she was really not afraid of ruffling feathers. She's not in there very long, but she is not a doormat, which I think there are plenty of actual working nurses who are a bit sick of being the flirty nurse or the does everything the doctor says nurse. So it was really fun to get to play someone who was not, if she wasn't scared to throw hands on behalf of her patient. She was ready. That was really fun. When it comes to playing a character, to finding a character, I think it is always looking for the thing you can relate to in them. I think there's always a lot of yourself on the table in acting, and you have to be willing to do that in order to be a really good actor, because that's the place where genuine emotion comes from. So when it comes with Nurse Anna, it was actually really easy for me, despite the fact that I'm not a confrontational person. I don't like to yell. I found it very intimidating. The nature of her position in the film as this protector coming up against another protector is something I could really relate to. I work as a teacher, I work as a caretaker. I'm very much used to this idea of protecting someone who is in a vulnerable position. So in that way, the nurse was an excellent character fit for me because I was able to immediately relate to her. On the page, she can come off as a not likable character. She's yelling at Dr. Summers, he's just trying to do the right thing. But the fact that she is coming from this extremely relatable place, this extremely emotional place, makes her someone who's a really, really good fit for me. Versus, there are plenty of characters who are written very specifically for a plot role or for a cool image in a film. You need to talk to the smoker girl. You need to have the background crying woman, for example. And those are simply the roles that I struggle with because they aren't written with an emotional core. They aren't written with something I can find and relate to. So that was one of the things that I really liked about playing the nurse, was that it was clear even in her brief moment that this was a person with motivations and emotions, even if Dr. Summers ends up sort of taking the brunt of her big anger. It's a very interesting position Nurse Anna is in, especially given the whole narrative context of the film, in that she is getting in the way. She is not helping. But at the same time, she is doing her job, and she is doing her job well. If Nurse Anna just sort of sat back and said, yes, please traumatize this old woman, yeah, that'd be great for Dr. Summers in some respects, but that wouldn't be true to a nurse, as someone who goes into nursing, much less to Nurse Anna as she was written. So in looking at the nurse's interaction with Dr. Summers, for me as a person, was pretty intimidating. I am not a tall or imposing figure. So getting into this position where I was really sort of taking him to task was intimidating reading on the page, but really kind of empowering to do in the moment. Obviously, Dr. Summers is not a bad guy. We're kind of on his side as the viewer, but coming at it from the nurse's perspective of, I don't know who you are. You are not supposed to be here, and you are upsetting my patient. So sort of really taking that moment to take a stand and to not let things intimidate you or push you back. That was really cool. And it's not something that I am very good about doing in real life. So getting to have that chance to experience it and to play with it, that was super cool for me. When thinking about Mrs. Hudson and the whole system that Mrs. Hudson has sort of ended up in, I think it's really interesting because we have this whole idea in our society of never aging, never growing old, and not liking to sort of think about or look at the people who have grown old. So the fact that Dr. Summers has to come and sort of seek her out and sort of acknowledge that this isn't just this frail, old, frightened woman, this is a person who raised somebody who has this whole life behind her. It's looking at, he's forced to kind of see her as a person. And that's something that we don't like to do with the elderly, especially when we're looking at how they're written in movies and TV. They are the character who dies off screen so the actor can be off for a few weeks, allegedly attending a funeral. But looking at them as people with lives and impacts and real pasts that we're interested in, beyond tell us another story about the war grandpa, I think that's a really interesting thing. And it's an interesting thing to think about. You know, the nurse probably takes care of 20, 30 people she's encountered in a day who are like Mrs. Hudson and have that whole history. And I mean, hopefully not children the same way, the same kind, but there is still that, which I think is really interesting to think about. You could probably make whole movies about these people the nurse encounters and takes care of. I think the male representation in this film is really interesting because obviously we have the central figure of Dr. Summers. He is our protagonist. He's the one we're supposed to sympathize with and follow. But at the same time, so much of his path is being determined by the women around him. He's trying to get information from women. He is looking for his wife. All of these things coming together means that it is the women or the female presences in the movie that are directing this course of action. And Dr. Summers is interestingly quite passive in a lot of ways. He is not the one who instigates the action. He is chasing after these figures, chasing after these answers that these women are providing. So it's almost an interesting reversal of how a lot of women are portrayed in film as the passive, reactive background character, where we have this man in the foreground, but he's not necessarily pulling the strings. He's not the one with all of the agency, which is an interesting position for him to be in, especially as the main character and main man of the film.
It's not me. I don't even know. You know? Keep doing it.
Diva actress right here.
Can't even keep it up.
I super enjoyed working with Alyssa, and I really enjoyed her style of directing. I felt like she hit a really nice balance between sort of her overall vision and the empowerment of the actors. There are plenty of directors you work with where they have this very firm and set in stone vision. And that's great that they have these really strong ideas, but it doesn't give space to collaborate with the actors as artists in their own right. It's more working around the director's needs. And I've worked with directors who give you nothing. And while that is certainly gives lots of fertile ground for playing with character, playing with actions, at the same time, there's a feeling of, so am I doing it right? Is this what you wanted? And so I think Alyssa hits a really good balance with that. And I also definitely want to thank her for being sure to look out for everybody and their health. You know, I was dealing with some health issues at the reshoot, and traditionally film is such a backbreaking, grueling process where you're expected to show up for 8 hours and get it done. And the fact that she took time to make sure that I was all right, that she made sure there were supports in place, it's a level of respect that I'm not used to seeing in the industry. And I really hope we see more of, because I can't say how much I really appreciated that. When talking about working with a female director versus a male director, honestly, I'd say one of the first differences that just comes up is the fact that women are centered in the film, and they are not props. They are complicated. I think it's pretty visible even in this character of Nurse Anna, who is, like we said, she is not helpful in this situation. She is actively preventing Dr. Summers from doing what he needs to do. But she is not dislikable. She is not a hag character or a harpy character getting in his way. You can understand where she's coming from, and she is written so you can see where she is coming from. And I'd say that is a major difference, because there are plenty of even good and well-intentioned male directors who fall back on these tropes, who fall back on these ideas, because they are used to, trained in, and have taken in all this media where women are these props, are these pieces, set pieces with roles to play, versus fully realized in their own right. There's also the fact that there were plenty of women on the crew, which is another thing that doesn't always happen. It's always, no matter how well-intentioned the male director is, we're all still working within this patriarchal world and in this society, which gives us these messages. So consciously or unconsciously, we end up falling into these patterns. And it's especially easy to do when you're in a position of privilege, like a male director would be. So I think just avoiding falling into some of those same traps is one of the things that I really saw. I think Grim Whimsy does a really important thing almost simply by existing, because it's telling stories written by these voices that are systemically not looked at, not made, films that aren't made. And there is this idea in the industry of, if we get representation, that is going to solve all of our problems. But all women aren't the same voice. All LGBT people aren't the same voice. All people of color are not the same voice. So putting one person in a position is not going to get these diverse voices heard. It is going to get one voice heard, and that one person probably has a lot of good things to say. But simply by being another voice, another film, another story, I think Grim Whimsy does that really important job of saying there are lots of complicated nuance. There are lots of different ideas and opinions within minority groups. And by making sure that those voices get heard, by producing films like this, by having female directors, by having directors of color, by having LGBT directors coming together and making their own things, telling their own story, I think that's hugely important in disrupting the idea of the default film and the default storyteller.